Hello folks, welcome to the second part of this CPS evening. Do we have any new members that are here for the first time? Okay, well you all know the drill, just follow each other out, they'll know where to go if there's an emergency. Okay. Following on from from John's Suckling's talk this morning with working to get one image, there were two things I've found just lately which I thought were very interesting and might interest you, and it's a different approach. The first one was that you may have seen that Tony Ray, New Zealander, won the Astronomer of the Year image with a photograph of Mount Cook. And he says he took 62 photographs and spliced them together. So it's a different approach, isn't it? That information, it was posted on the PSNZ website if you want to have a look at it. The other one is something that I dragged up from memory and did a quick Google search and relocated it. A photographer I admired called Jim Brandenburg a National Geographic photographer, your reference to National Geographics, he decided he was getting stale. I think this was still in the days of film. So he decided for 90 days, the luxury of having time off for 90 days, and he was going to take one photo a day, and did so. And it's an outstanding piece of work. You can find it on YouTube. He made a book out of it and a video, and it just meant you do all the thinking before you take the shot, or you grab it when something happens. Bit different from the approach I take, which is more sort of pray and spray. Okay, all right, this evening we have some notices first. Next week we have the C grade question and answer, and I would encourage people to put in questions that will be answered. No question is too dumb. You can have questions about how the club works, or how processing, you have issues with processing or something like that. Email those to our president, which you can find on the website, Ian. The second notice is that we will be having post-processing 7 o'clock sessions, and the first one that's been planned is on the 8th of October, and it is Alan Moore who's going to talk about focus stacking, and there'll be more on that at the night. The third notice is a new addition to the program. We'll have Tony Hickland speaking on forensic photography on October the 15th. That's something I certainly am looking forward to. That'll be real interesting. Do we have any other messages or notices? Okay, then it is my great pleasure to introduce our president, Ian Walls, who joined the brain drain temporarily out of New Zealand, but he's come back, which is good, and he'll talk to us about travels in Alaska. Ian.
Hello, that's working. All right, thanks Nelson. You can hang on to that. I've got one. Okay, just a warning before, let's see if we can turn that off. There we go, is that any better? A warning before we start. Joe always points out that I talk too long, so if I do talk too long, start shuffling your chairs or make some noise, or let me know that I'm talking too long, and I'll talk faster or stop, one or the other, because I can talk all night about this. It was just such an awesome time. And the other thing is, if you see something that's interesting throughout, feel free to ask me a question then, or we can come back to it at the end, just depending how long I talk is the crux of it. Okay, I have done 2 trips to Alaska in the last few years, so I'm kind of putting them all together into this one talk, the stuff I've seen. And let's start with, where is Alaska? And that's Alaska, the funny blue. That's not a 100% perfect map, but it's a pretty good indication of where we are. And you'll see it's a bit of an oddball shaped country, and well north. You'll see there's the Arctic Circle that goes through the middle of it, and that's Anchorage, which is the biggest city effectively. There's only two cities. There's Anchorage there and Fairbanks is over there, which is borderline a city. Interestingly though, Anchorage is not the capital. The capital is Juneau, which is down here. Oddball shape that there's this big piece up there and there's this other little bit along the coast of Canada. There's a really big mountain range just between the two, so there's not like borders you can nip across. The other interesting thing is the road maps that you can see there are pretty much all the roads in the whole country. And you'll see that anywhere out along the peninsula here or down in the Juneau kind of area, there's no roads there. So there are roads within the little places, but you have to fly or go by boat to get anywhere. So the various trips the first trips I went there in the winter and I went there in the summer earlier in this year. So the winter trip started in Anchorage and went basically through Talkeetna up to Fairbanks and then up the Brooks Highway up there and then back again. In the summer we did two things. I flew into Juneau down here and I did a cruise on a small boat, smallish boat we'll talk about, which basically was around these islands here. And this is what's sort of loosely called the Inland Passage, where lots of cruise ships come from Seattle and Vancouver and they go up to Seaward, which is kind of up about here. Okay, so that's Alaska where we are, and we'll come back to various bits. So I'm going to start with the winter trip. So it was with Chris McLennan, who I'm really working hard to get to come and to be a speaker for us later in the year, and if we do, that'll be really cool. So I met Chris, first of all, when he was a speaker at the convention that we ran in 2021, and his talk intrigued me so much that I said, hey, that's really cool, I'd really love to do that Alaska winter thing. And about 18 months later, he rang me up and said, there's a slot if you're quick. And yeah, I went on it and had a great time. And what appealed was all these lot of huge pictures of amazing auroras and snowscapes and all sorts of stuff. But Chris has been there every winter for forever, so he goes there a lot. One of the things that I came away from this is that if you want to be an aurora photographer, or anything else for that matter, you have to go and live there. So when you go there on a trip, don't necessarily expect to get the whole thing. Anyway, so this trip started by flying into Anchorage, and the first day there, we basically had to have our gear check. So that's the gear that I kind of had. And there's also some fancy boots, and I've got that coat, but I've put it on a couple of times at home. It's a bit of an overkill, to be fair. It's designed for like minus 25, 30, and you put it on here at -2, it's like walking around in a sleeping bag. So, but it's super effective, and I'm gonna use it a lot. You can't see, but I've got some really fancy Arctic boots on there as well, which is another part of the gear we had to get, and basically was all checked before they let us get on the bus, so before you started. So the first night in Anchorage, we saw this just from down in the park, 100 yards, 200 yards from the hotel. It was just kind of intriguing because my daughter had, a couple of years before this, done a university exchange where she went and did a year in Finland. Complicated story about how she got there, but I remember asking her, why do you want to go to Finland? She said, I want to see the Northern Lights. So that was the reason she chose Finland over all the other options. And she was there for a year. She did 3 trips to Lapland, which is the northern part of it. And then when she came back, she went to Iceland for a week before she flew home, and she never saw the Northern Lights the whole time she was there. So I'd been in Alaska for a day, and I sent her this email of the picture of the first night I was there. She was ropeable, to be fair. Anyway, so that was a super cool start to just see that, to move on. But the first part of the trip was following the Iditarod dog sled race. And the next slide is the map of where the Iditarod goes. And you'll see that it starts, there's a big star in Anchorage, I'll talk about that in a minute. It starts at this little lake called Willow, and it goes through each of those named places, checkpoints they have to go into. We'll talk about a little later. And they alternate between the northern route and the southern route in the middle, but it ends up in Nome, way up there. And that's about 1,000 miles they talk about, so that's a hell of a long way to go with dogs. It's a really fascinating race, and I've been following it ever since then because I've become really interested in it. It's kind of cool. So it starts in Anchorage, and this happened on the first day we were there. We did a gear check in the morning, picked up some stuff, and then in the afternoon they have a ceremonial start where the dog teams basically run around a track in Anchorage, and people draw lots to be taken. So you'll see the person who won the ride on number 25 around the streets of Anchorage, and it's just kind of a fun way to start, and there's bajillions of people lined up to see them and a bunch of enthusiastic dogs. The next day we went to Willow, and we went to a lake about 5 k's from the original start, and we just spotted a place as they all came through team by team. So this is somebody who's just started. They've gone about 5k. They've only got 999 miles to go, basically. And the dogs are coming down the hill and up and away. You'll notice the trail markers there. There's trail markers pretty much the entire length, and that's the work behind getting this trail available is pretty extraordinary. You know, they put the trail markers in, but then it snows. It's not necessarily going to be there the next day, but they've done some preparatory work. The coolest thing for me, though, is look at the look on those dogs' faces. They are just having a ball. They were so enthusiastic, and they just got a happy look about them, haven't they? So note their feet. They wear snow boots, basically. If they don't have those little shoelet things on, they get ice and snow between their paws, and they'll go lame pretty quickly. So that's something they've been doing for a long time, and each of the mushers will have huge supply of those little booty things that they put on the dogs. So we watched the first start, and then we went to a cool little town called Tulkeepna, which is on that main highway a little bit further north, and we flew out of there up into sort of a checkpoint further on. So this is us this is on our way into the tech turn point at Rainey's Pass. You can see that area down there. This is us as we're going downwind to turn final and land. That's the runway, and that's a lake. So that's what happens in the wintertime. These lakes all freeze, and that just means the aeroplanes on skis can go and land there. So this is the checkpoint at the top of Rainey's Pass, which is a kind of a major staging point. They go up and over Rainey's Pass and back down the other side of the Alaskan range, and into the sort of inner lands of where they are. And that's the aeroplane we're on. This is a Beaver, a turbo Beaver. I've got a picture of a Beaver later on, but this one's got the big snout on the front. It means they've put a turbine jet engine on a 1954 aeroplane, and it's really cool. Super powerful and very effective machine. These things have been flying in Alaska forever and a day, and they'll still be flying in another 50 years, I think. This is a picture from the flight up to Rainey's Pass. Can you see the dog team there? See, there's the trail, and there's the team. And they're right out in the middle of nowhere. And this was a gorgeous day for them, so they were happy as Larry by the time they got to the start of this thing. We flew over the original pass as they were going in, and they'd already spread out a little bit from the start, and they had to go through a checkpoint at, I can't remember the name of the checkpoint, I can look it up if you see it, but this is the checkpoint at the bottom of Rainey's Pass, and there's the team coming in. They go through the gate there. Essentially, before they'll let them go over the mountain pass, the dogs have to be vet checked. So that happens all the way along each of these staging points. Each time they go through a checkpoint, the minute they pull in, they check them. So it's similar to kind of endurance horse racing, if you've ever seen that, where the animal has to be at a certain health level and its heartbeat at a certain what have you. So these are checked just before they go up onto Rainey's Pass. And this person has just come over the ridge. This is the ridge that comes into the top of Rainey's Pass and down onto the lake. So this musher has just managed the really steep climb. It's about twice the height of the Porter's Pass climb that these dogs have gone up through, tree lines, things, and onto the pass. And then at the pass, once they come in there, they basically all took a rest because they've just climbed a big hill, and they refurbished the dogs, and then the bottom one is them having passed the check going, so this team had just pulled in, they were looking a little bit more pooped, and they had passed the vet check, the initial vet check, and then another one comes over. So this is the sort of escorting vet who keeps an eye on them for the first little bit. They do an initial check and then they check them while they settle down. And this musher here has settled her dogs in to, they feed the dogs. They've got a whole bunch of things that they can do for them. And they do drop dogs off at times though. So there's a tactical essence of how you do this that makes the whole thing interesting. About some mushers will try to keep their teams intact. They start with 14. Some of them will try to keep them intact for as long as they can, and others will have sort of sprinter dogs who will pull them up the hill and then they drop them. So there were a couple of dogs dropped that I was there. They were putting them on an aeroplane to go back, and I went and had a yarn with the pilot, and he said, come and talk to the dogs. And you could actually see the dogs were really peeved about being left behind while their mates were going. But anyway, they throw them in the thing and then they take them back to anchorage, and the musher picks them up 2 weeks later. We'll go next way. But this is how the dogs spend most of their time while they're waiting. When they're finished, they have something to eat and they crash because they're off again fairly shortly. Now that was a magic day right up in the mountains. It was gloriously sunny, as you saw, and everything was going very well. Interestingly, gloriously sunny is not what the mushers want because the dogs don't like it. It's too hot. They want it cold. So that's an aside. But when we flew back, and that was pretty spectacular. That's Denali, just over 20,000 feet, high mountain in the middle of in the Alaskan range, and this is looking down onto to the various rivers as we flew over it. Over there, it was spectacular. We went back to Talkeetna, which is it's an interesting little town. It's on the railroad, which I'll talk about in a minute. And there's a number of things there, but it has got a spectacular view of the Denali Range. And you can be there. It's kind of like Mount Cook. The number of people who've been to Talkeetna 20 times and never seen Denali, and we were lucky enough to get there, and that view was just amazing, just extraordinary. You felt like you could reach out and touch them. And they made the Southern Alps feel small. So that's Denali. Also, another picture of Denali. This is the river that goes through the edge of Talkeetna, and it's all kind of frozen in frozen chunks. So the guide that took us, he had done the Iditarod a few years ago, and he's got a friend also who has a dog team that lives next door to him, and she had her dog team out, and they talked her into coming back past where we were sort of camped and waiting to take some photographs. And when she saw us, she ended up going round and round about 4 times, basically, while we took a bunch of pictures of her. But I just really enjoy looking at her and the mountain in the background and just the spectacular skies. And this was about 9 o'clock at night, so that the sun's just starting to go down. It didn't get cold till about 10 or 11. And that's the picture that I entered in CPS, which is her, but I've manufactured a few dogs and put them in twice because I thought the team looked better. And then I painted wax all over it, and James said some interesting things about it. He enjoyed it, but it didn't bear much relationship to what I actually saw, which was the previous one. So, but anyway, I enjoyed it. One of the cool things we did when we were there, we went to visit a dog kennel. Now, if you start following the Iditarod, you'll see there's about 4 sets of names that run all the way through it. That family have been doing this for forever and a day. The Mackeys, the Reddingtons, and the Seavies are the major. There are others, but those are the three names that just come back every time and again. The father and the uncle and the son and the brother and whatever. And this is Dallas Seavies Kennel at Talkeetna. And Dallas he's won it 6 times now, so he's pretty seriously keen on winning it when he goes in there, and he's a professional sled dog racer. He has about 220 dogs in his kennel. He had 3 litters of puppies that were there when we were there and visited them, and they're kind of cool to play with and enthusiastic. But the dogs are super friendly, and they're just keen to come and say hello, and they showed us around, and it was really cool. One of the interesting things that Dallas had there that not many other people have is, as I said, it's about the dogs like it when it's cold. So over the summer, when it's not cold and there's no snow, sled dogs pretty much just curl up under a tree and go to sleep and wait for winter to come again. They're not keen at all on keeping fit or doing anything because it's too damn hot for them. They do send them up into the mountain. They go up onto Denali and to high places to sort of tow people around for touristy things, and they do that primarily for training. But Dallas has gone high tech. In the corner of his kennel area, he had it looked like a 40-foot container and a 20-foot container stuck together, and they were stuck together and welded together, and they were refrigerated containers. And he said that inside is a treadmill about the length of a dog team. And so he when it's still getting hot, he cools it down and he takes the dogs in, and he reckons he gets 3 to 4 weeks of extra training into these dogs in this refrigerated training mechanism. So you can see how serious they are about it. And when you talk to them about the food that goes into these dogs, it's just unbelievable what they do. So the prize for winning the Iditarod is something like $50,000. Just doesn't go anywhere when it comes to this. So they survive on a huge amount of sponsorship and all sorts of stuff. But it was a fantastic place to go to. If you're a dog person, you're just in heaven, and I really enjoyed it. You go into the entrance area, the tourist entrance area, and there were 4 dogs here that were his old retired ones that he just was no way they were leaving the property sort of thing. And they were lying about on couches in the area, and they, anybody who came in, they'd come and say hello. And if you were, deemed to be suitable, you're allowed to sit on the couch next to the dog. Otherwise, you were on your way. Cool place to visit. But the main thing for going there was to have a go at it. So they have a track that we go around and basically set you up with the dogs and give you 2 seconds worth of lessons, and you pretend you know what you're doing, and the dogs know where they're going, and off you go. It was good fun. You can, there's breaks and commands that the dogs listen to, and if you don't, the people a couple ahead of us essentially crashed into each other and made a bit of a mess of things, because the dogs, when they see another team in front of them, they are athletes. They think, I'm going to pass them. And if you don't control that, they will try passing them, and you'll get a stringy, messy, whatever. That nearly happened in front of us. That was really good fun. So that's what we did. The second day we were in Talkeetna, and then the third day we went and had a look at the other method of transporting yourself around in the winter in Alaska, and that is a snow machine. This is the guy who was the instructor who taught us how to drive these things, and we didn't get quite to as good as he is, but he knew what he was doing. One of the interesting things is somebody called it a snowmobile, and all sorts of things happened. You do not call these things a snowmobile in Alaska. It is a snow machine. They call them skidoos in Canada and snow machines in Alaska. Nobody ever managed to figure out why, but anyway, that's what they are. So we had about an hour and a half worth of sort of teaching on how to operate this thing, and then off we went with this guy leading us and Chris at the back, and went on all afternoon, came back normal, it was probably about 8 o'clock by the time we got back out into the sort of area that the Iditarod teams had gone. And if you look carefully through the track, you'll see a bunch of spaced out snow machines. That's us. This is Chris with his drone taking a picture of us. He did give us instructions to be nicely spaced out to get the perfect picture, but whoever number 3 was there didn't achieve the nice spacing. But we had to do the I'm cool Tom Cruise picture of us at the end, so I've got one of those, and Denali in the background. The sort of places we went to out on the rivers, this is the sort of stuff you saw. Interestingly, if you stood on that snow, you could easily be buried up to your waist in it and got to get back onto the packed snow. You can walk on there with snowshoes, but if you haven't got snowshoes and boots and you step off it, and or if you take the snow machine off the track, you'll bog in there pretty quickly. But there's big chunks of ice. The ice freezes, and then if you get warm and cold bits, it'll freeze. It'll be frozen about a foot thick, and then you'll have like a warm week, and all the pieces will crack up, and then the water will push them behind and force up these little kind of iceberg things all over the place. And you get close to them, you can brush off the snow, and it's gorgeous blue all the way through. So that was cool. So we did that during the day, and then when it got dark, this is the sort of carry on. So the aurora is just there the whole time, and it's completely visible. I'd seen these things from the air before, but I'd never seen them on the ground, and you could just stand out there till 2 o'clock in the morning going, wow, and it's just really cool. This is John's house. This is our guide who's got this little house in the middle of nowhere, so I've got that picture there because it was a bit fainter over, but that's what it looked when you turned around the other way. It's a lake out the back of his place, and this just was there for 2 or 3 hours, and it moved backwards and forwards, and that's a pretty realistic. It's not quite the same when you see the oranges and the pinky colours in New Zealand that you only see on your camera. The greens are in a different part of the aurora, and you can see them clearly. But as I said, I've come to the conclusion that I am not going to be able to go to Alaska and get like 3 nights and hope to get an award-winning aurora picture, because people who live there get out on the actual perfect days. And on a day like today, I found it amazing, but most aurora photographers would be, oh yeah, whatever. I'll come back next week when the KP, whatever it is more than it, whatever, you know what I mean. They're like that. So I found that picture and I went, yeah, I'm sweet, but I made it into a me picture that looks like that I'm happier with because none of them have even done that or thought to do it, and I've just, that's what I tend to do. So that's, so we finished there. This is the last night we were in Talkeetna. You can see Talkeetna in the middle, there it is. So Anchorage is down there, we've moved up. Willow Lake's about there, and the Iditarod goes through here, and Rainey's Pass about there. So this is the railway line. This is the singular railway line in Alaska. It goes from Seward, which is the port there, through to Fairbanks, and we're at Talkeetna. So we did the train trip from Talkeetna to Fairbanks, and it's a scenic train. So that's what the look of it is like. So the various carts, it's similar to doing the whatever you call it, to Greymouth. It was really cool. Big windows, and you just sat there. I can't remember how long it took, but it seemed to just take ages as we went through there. But we're going through these big snow-filled ravines and bits and pieces, and you go right past the start of the Denali camp on our way in there. It didn't take many photographs, but I did what I usually do and did some kind of ICM blurry, circly things as we moved past the trees that I kind of enjoyed that. So I don't know if you've ever tried this. If you if you're on a moving platform and you focus on something and you move your camera and stay focused on the same point as it goes past you, you get these circular blurs that are really fun to play with. So that's a technique that's fun, and it's something I could have done hours standing there in the gap between the carriages. But it was such a cool place to look out the window. That's what I did as well. So, and we arrived in Fairbanks. And then the plan from Fairbanks was to drive the Dalton Highway, which goes from Fairbanks there through to Dead Horse, which is essentially where the oil fields operate out of. Intriguing names they have for places, but I'm assuming there is a dead horse, or at some point there has been a dead horse up there. And that's the road we went. And if you've ever watched the Ice Road Truckers on wherever it has been on at various points, that is the road that the Ice Road Truckers are on. and we drove the ice road when the ice road stuff was going on there. It is something that you're not allowed to just go and I'm going to take my four-wheel drive up on it. You have to be logged in, you have to have a flight plan, and you have to have radios, and you have to be at certain times and stuff, because there's big rigs like that blasting along the side of the road there doing 100k. And we just stopped on the side of the road, and one of the other groups sort of walked out a little bit into the middle, and the guy was in charge of us and who was driving the van, whose licence it was all being based on, it went ballistic. Get off the road right now, because one of these things will come around the corner. It looks easy there when you can see it. It was a gorgeous blue day and it's a bright red truck and it's really obvious. It's less obvious when it's like that, but he's still doing 100k and he ain't going to stop. And so they just really got to keep out of their way. But it's just admiring what they do as they came past was pretty extraordinary. About halfway up the Dalton Highway, you go over the Yukon River, and there's a camp at the Yukon River. And then a little bit further on, there's the thing that they call the Enchanted Forest. And basically it's a forest which is up above this permanent kind of snow line. And it's like hoarfrost gone to the next level. It gets hoarfrost upon hoarfrost upon hoarfrost, and then snow comes on it and it freezes it. So you get this sort of thing. And we got there, and it was probably the perfect time to get there because the cloud had come over the top of the hill and rolled in, and walking through this stuff, because we could walk through bits of it, it was just felt like ghostly and weird, and it's just amazing to stand there amongst these trees that are just coated and packed in ice, and you think, how the hell can that tree survive? But they do. They stand up again in the summer, and and away they go. So the next one, just on the bottom for a bit of scale, is somebody standing there and just looking up at these trees that are, packed and baked and those sort of stuff. And the other ones on the other side of the road, kind of with a little bit of blue in the sky, almost looked sort of ghostly. So we went past the Yukon River, past the Enchanted Forest, and then you go up a little bit further and you cross over the to the Arctic Circle, and then carry on up, and we went and stayed at a place called Coldfoot. And again, this is the place, if you've watched the Ice Road Truckers, most of the stories about the Ice Road Truckers kind of orientate around Coldfoot Camp. And this is Coldfoot. And this is the camp. And they basically, most of the truckers pull up there, they plug their vehicles in, and they either leave them running or they have them on a permanent electrical plug thing, and they sleep and live in their cab to get their hours rest before they can go on. So they generally drive from Fairbanks to Coldfoot. They stay the night there, and they're up first thing in the morning, and then they're off trying to get up to Dead Horse, and then they try to come back again. It's not possible to go up and all the way back to Coldfoot, so they have another stop on the way, and then they go to Coldfoot, and then they go back. So they do a 5-day rotation, these guys. They drive for 5 days and then go back to Fairbanks for like 2 days, and then they go and do it again. And this goes the whole year round, all these trucks going up and down there. And this shed here is a pretty significant engineering space, because this is, if you can get your truck to Coldfoot, there's some clever guys there that spend the whole winter fixing trucks, and they're sort of the imaginative engineers. With creative engineer you have to be to work in Coldfoot and fix anything and make it go. So intriguing place. This is the restaurant area, and this is inside it, and it's just amazing. Interesting people to talk to, cool place, but toasty warm inside, and real basic American trucker food is what you'd imagine. And camping there was pretty cool. And we went from there to do some more. The intention was to be up in the middle of the night looking at auroras and stuff like that. So there's a reasonable number of, I think there was another photography group there as well. This sort of thing happens all the time. And this is, there's a temperature outside this. This is the accommodation area, and that's showing -10 Celsius, and that is in the warmest part of the day, in the middle of the afternoon. So that was -10 in the middle of the afternoon. When it got really cold, the coldest I had was -29, so that was chilly. And then we were on our way, and we went past the Alaskan pipeline. And this is a really interesting, cool structure as well. It's 1,300 kilometres long, and it starts up by Detours where the oil fields are, and it pumps all the way back down past Anchorage out to Valdez is the name of the port, which is a name you might have heard before. And that's where the oil is put into transporters and moves on from there. It's a pretty amazing piece of engineering to keep it going that way. And in order to get the oil to move, they have pumping stations and heating stations. The oil has to be warmed up to make it liquid enough to be pumped. And so there's about 6 pumping stations that get down to Fairbanks. And the most challenging part of it is in this part that comes up and over Attican Pass and then down through the Arctic Circle. And there's some areas of it, basically when you get to Fairbanks, it's all underground out until the coast. But up this part of it, it's not underground. And the reason for not being underground is because if you put it underground, the heat that would be given off, it's insulated as much as they can, but it still would create warmth and it would melt the permafrost. And that's the last thing you want to do. If permafrost melts, it turns to mud and mush. So the roads that are on the ice road truckers are on, they don't disturb any of the permafrost or in the soil, they just put material on top of it. Because if you defrost the permafrost, you've just got squishy mud. So there are a few areas where the pipeline goes underground in the permafrost, but they have actually heat conducting, basically heat pumps to take the heat away from the outside of it so that the permafrost stays in there. It's in super duper insulated stuff, but it actually has external heat pumps. And you can see it. I didn't get any photographs of it, but you can see these little spiky things here and they go all the way down. Those are like heat diffusers. And if you see the underground piece of pipeline, there's heat diffusers that look like that, but they're twice as big as these metal columns, and they follow all the way along there, and that sucks the heat out of that's lost by the pipe and lets it out so that the permafrost doesn't freeze. The other thing they have a great deal of concern about is they don't want this blocking the migration paths of the caribou and other animals that are up there. So that's why they're so far above the ground, so that the animals can go underneath them. There are some areas where it's flat. It's cheaper to do it that way, but most of it's up and a long way to keep it away. The other thing you'll notice is, notice how that's a big kind of an S-bend that it does. The reason for that S-bend is because as the temperature changes, those pipes, the thing gets longer or shorter, basically. So when it's really cold, it's virtually straight line, and when it's hot, it's a big curvy bend. And you can see that this H-like structure is what it sits on. This little square piece here moves laterally on that structure as the pipes expand and contract. So pretty amazing piece of engineering to actually achieve the pulling out of oil from ridiculous places. So that's what we're kind of doing. But it was cool to see it. One of the other things that I really found fascinating were these icy waterfalls. As the rivers come down, there's a waterfall there in the summertime, and it started freezing, and then you get this kind of icy, it feels like Mr. Frosty Man from the superheroes has, done whatever he does and made the thing freeze. But so there's this really kind of cool looking frozen iceberg. And that is on the back of this mountain here, that one there, looking on the other side, and that's Sukapak Mountain. And where this big flat area that I'm on here is a lake in the summertime. So this is apparently there's bajillion mosquitoes on this particular lake, but it just in the wintertime looked just amazing. And this big vast flat area of of stuff, and this extraordinary looking mountain in the background. We went this day up over Attican Pass down the other side, and there's an area there that's really windy. It's kind of, they have their equivalent of a northwest wind that comes down this particular valley, and in that valley, it's a bit difficult to get to, but you could go out there and the rivers have frozen completely. It's still flowing underneath it, but you're probably talking about 2.5 metres of thick ice. And because it's so windy in there, what happened is that the snow, whenever it snows, the wind blows all the snow around and it polishes the exposed pieces of ice. So it makes this extraordinary blue colour as you come down this kind of U-shaped glacial valley. And so these just incredible big chunks of ice that are stunning blue were there. That's what we went to particularly photograph. And we came back in the middle of the night because the aurora sign was pretty good on the last night we were there. Well, I think it was only moderately good, but it's the last night there, so we had to go. And we came back to that same place we were on the Suckerpack Lake to photograph the aurora, and stood there for ages and nothing really happened. It was more like a New Zealand sort of a dull glow aurora, but I really was quite I made this photograph there and I really like it compared with the other. It's not the same dramatic aurora, but it, you know, it's one of my favourite pictures from the place with the streaky satellite in the top. But overall, the things that I enjoyed photographing the most in Alaska in winter were little subtle details of things that you just kind of don't see here, and that's things like icicles. So this was just on the accommodation, just outside the accommodation in Talkeetna. You know, the icicles form there and the sun going down and behind it. They actually warned us, do not walk along underneath these things, because at certain times of the year they start falling off and they fall from sort of yay height, and you get an icicle through the top of your head, you'll know all about it. So just to see those sort of things was cool. We saw the same thing in Wiseman, which is a little village just not very far away from Coldfoot, and that was kind of cool as well. It's an old wooden buildings that people live in the middle of nowhere. One of the other things that I really found intriguing was you get a blast of wind comes through the trees, and all the little bits of snow and ice crystals that are settled on the trees just get blown into the air, and suddenly the whole place is full for about 30 seconds of floating ice crystals, which when they were backlit like this, looked absolutely gorgeous. That was a detail that I enjoyed really a lot. And then just the shapes of, little bits of fur and, animal skins that they use for all sorts of things and are just lying around the place. Just the details in those were something I really enjoyed. So that is the finish of the winter trip. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I might be on my to-do list to go back and do it again, you never know. So now I'm going to talk about this year's trip, and this year we first of all went and did a kind of adventure cruise, like I said before in the picture, in around Juneau, based in Juneau in Glacier Bay, which is where the inland passage is. So it was with a company called Uncruise. That wasn't the vessel we were on, but this was the company. They call themselves Uncruise because they're unlike a cruise. Don't even think about a 5,000 person cruise. These are boats that range from sort of 25, 30 people through to about 110. We're on a middle-sized one with about 75, and it's a good number of people because you're on it for about a week, and by the end of it, you've spoken to pretty much everybody. You've had lunch or dinner with everybody. It's kind of cool. That's where we went. Juneau is just in here, and Juneau's the capital of Alaska, interestingly. So that's in there. That was basically you started off as a Russian town. We went this way, up and around here. We stopped here, and then we went up to the top of Glacier Bay and spent some time. You can see we've spent, well, that's 2 stops. It was 2 nights, basically, we spent up in that part of the bay, and you don't get to do that very often. If you're on the 5,000 person ships, they come down this channel here, they slow down for 30 seconds to take a pier up to the valley where the glacier is, and most of the people are sitting there in the casino or whatever the hell they're doing, don't even bother looking out the window, and then off they go. Where we were right up in by the glacier, and it was fantastic. Came back down here, same deal in here, and then we did a lap of Admiralty Island, which is this one, and we went up through here to the Tracy Arm, which I'll talk about in a minute. So that's like a week's cruise around here. The same company does some cruises from Sitka, which is in here, another little coastal town. You can go from Sitka down and around. There's about 4 or 5 different options they do, but this is one that pretty much depended what we could get on, but we really enjoyed it. And here it is, the Wilderness Discoverer, which is what we were on, and our cabin was that one, but on the other side. So the front one on the other side. So you go out of your cabin onto the walkway that is around the side of the thing. So, and that's right up on the bow as we're moving along, going up through the glacier. I put my tripod on there and just left it on a long exposure as the thing moved backwards and forwards, and it was kind of fun. But that's what we were motoring past, just huge majestic peaks like that, right in the big glacial valleys, and they're just amazing. It's a little tiddler of a mountain that's only like 15,000 feet. It's not very big at all, sort of thing, so most of them are much bigger and huge. This was the glacier at the end of that first Glacier Bay National Park. It's called the Johns Hopkins Glacier. It's really extensively studied glacier, and has moved back a little bit, but it's still pretty solid and goes a long way up. It goes right up around the back corner in there, and there's another big glacial field comes down the other side of this hill. It doesn't get to the water. This is called a tidewater glacier because it comes all the way through to the ocean, basically, and that's what they call it, a tidewater. And from time to time, these things, big chunks fall off. They call it calving, when bits fall off the glacier and smash into it, and I saw a couple of those. There's a piece falling off the glacier, it smashed into the water while we were out and about, and the next thing you know, there's a big rocky wave as we go. But so clearly you don't go right up to the side of the glacier is the crux of it. So that's what we did there. The coolest thing about this is you can get right up close, and it wasn't that one, it was the day 2 place we went right. There was a glacier we could get up to which had retreated and is no longer a tidewater glacier, and now it's got a beach in front of it. So we could go up to the beach and walk along the beach, and we climbed up the side and clambered up on the top of the glacier, which was pretty cool, and there were some spectacular things to see and some neat photographs to date of kind of ice forms and that sort of stuff. As I say, the pieces are falling off as you come through, and so as you motor in the boat relatively slowly up towards these glaciers and get reasonably close to them, you're seeing these little mini icebergs, and those are probably 2 metres tall, just floating down past the boat, and I just stayed out there for ages watching them. It was really cool. That's another one I enjoyed. And then there's some big chunks come off, and they stay pretty solid, and that would be the size of a rugby field probably. You could see some of them, I didn't put any in here, but I've got some photographs of some of them that have turned over as the water underneath basically erodes the glacier until the bit above the iceberg, until the bit above it is heavier than the bit underneath it, and then the thing tips up, and then the form of the bit that's been eroded looks really cool. So and that's a brighter blue. So this may have done that a little bit earlier. It's another really cool blue one. And this one's further down. I kind of like the interface between that and the trees. So what we did while we were on this adventure cruise, because that's the best way to talk about it, is that we try to get involved as much as you can. So there was lots of wildlife. So I was photographing an otter, and there's an otter that was playing under the jetty there at one of the places we stopped. It's a sea otter. So I don't know if anybody's ever seen a sea otter. If you've seen the little otters Marana Park or all those sort of places. They're about, I'm going to say, 4 times as big as that. But they're the same sort of playful looking hard case animals that, you know, keep coming back. This one was just showing off, I think, as while people were taking photographs of him. But what he did show us, you can't see particularly well there, but they carry a rock underneath their arm. They've got a little place that they just hold it under their armpit, and they dive down and they grab a piece of shellfish, and you can see him come up. He pops up to the surface with his shellfish, lies on his back, picks up the rock in one hand and smashes the shell with the rock, and then eats it and throws the shell down, gets another one, but tucks the same rock up. And apparently they have the same rock for years and years and years and years. So if we think we're something special because we're tool-making animals, that we ain't the only ones. There's lots of other animals that are smart and do kind of cool things. So that was he was sort of right up to the jetty on a place we got off, so you saw him close. But sometimes we would be cruising past and you saw this goat wandering along on the hill. So this is longest lens I had from some distance away, and you can see them, but you're not going to get world-shattering nature images like this, but you do get to see them, and that's kind of the point. This is a Siska deer. It's about half the size of a fallow deer. They're really little and really kind of cute. I took this photograph on a Zodiac that we were motoring around and saw this little guy on a little island we went past. We did see whales, but that's as good a photograph as I got. I did see them doing their divey, flippy things, but some distance away. And we did see some orca, but not many. The interesting thing was the orca went reasonably close to the boat during dinner time, and everybody was having dinner, and then whoever it was, I think it was the first officer, was driving the ship. He said, if you might be interested, there's a pod of orca just going past on the port side, and we were on that side, so we look out the window, and the next thing, everybody on the other side of the restaurant was like looking through the thing, so I'm surprised we didn't tip over. But anyway, dinner stopped while we looked at the orca, so obviously I didn't have my camera there then, but we saw them. The aim of the exercise is to see them there, not necessarily to photograph them. Eagles, there's plenty of eagles around the place. They were kind of cool. So that's the wildlife smatterings we saw. It's about seeing wildlife, not necessarily photographing them. But we did take the kayaks, and you probably saw how the other week I cheated and made this look a bit different to what it does there, but this is the perspective that I wanted of where we went kayaking. Sometimes we went kayaking in these big bays and went up towards the base of the glacier. Sometimes we were in little bays out in the boondocks, so that's also my wife in the front part of the kayak, and we just floated around in this. It was just amazing. You know, spent all morning just sort of meandering around these bays in this kayak, and it was just fantastic. Really enjoyed it. And we also went out and sort of guided Zodiac trips. And this is the, what's it called? South Sawyer Glacier. This is towards the end of the trip, and it's back closer to Juneau. And so you're out on these kind of Zodiacs with the guides taking you a little bit closer, and you can kind of see things. But what I want you to do is to have a look at this area here, and in particular that little rock, and then see what happens. A big chunk fell in while I was right there, and that caused a pretty significant kind of tidal wave thing as we were rocked on the Zodiac. The guys, we were all looking for it. We heard this big crack, and then we saw it. He basically yelled, "Hang on!" and we hung on, and then off we went. I'll just go back a second. Oh, no, actually the next one might show. No, it doesn't. Can't see it particularly well here, but this is in the glacier and back close to up the Tracy Arm. About 2 weeks after we left there, right up towards the front, and a wider shot would show it better, but you can see all this kind of rocky, loose-looking material up there, and it comes all the way around to the side. A huge landslip happened in there that went over this, it would have been exactly this part of the ice, and covered this ice completely, smashed a whole bunch of it, and then went down over the glacier and off the side of it and slipped into the water. Fortunately, it happened about 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was like huge, filled half the place. Where our Zodiac is would have had rocks on it. And I've seen sort of aerial photographs they took of it. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. Fortunately, there were no tourist boats up there, so it didn't happen. And by the time the tidal wavy thing got back out to the main channel, it was pretty much gone. But there were a group of people who had kayaked up there. They were kayaking up there, and they'd landed on a place, on a little beach about halfway up the thing, and they had pulled their kayaks well up out of the water because it's tidal there, so they'd pull right up out of the water. And they in camps, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, they heard this big rumble, and the next thing you know, the tents were in water. They kind of pulled everything up, skedaddled up the hill and sort of stayed there. They got up in the morning, their kayaks were all gone, their campsite was mainly gone, and here they were stranded going, okay. Fortunately, somebody came back up and picked them up later on, but it was a good lesson of what can happen and how close it was there. Fortunately, it didn't happen while we were there, was the main thing. We also visited, you've got to do the cultural thing, and we went and talked to some people. The Tlingit people are the native people who live in this kind of area, and they've got some really interesting history, cool stories, and they're only too keen to tell you all about it and talk about the raven, which is the thing at the top, and just their history. They had a really fascinating thing about how they catch halibut, which is a long story, but anyway, that's part of what we enjoyed. But I also saw a carver making one of these totem pole things, so that was kind of cool. But what you do at the end of one of these trips, and they do it every time, and I'd done something similar when we did a trip to Fiordland in Fiordland, and that is the dive in the water thing that everybody does. And I kind of went, it's not that cold, it's fine, I've done this in Fiordland, it won't be too bad. I think I'm lined up at the second or third back there. It was bloody cold, much colder than Fiordland, and so I was in for about 2 seconds. But anyway, that's what they do when you finish that off. Really cool trip, great bunch of people that run it. They just have a huge amount of fun. And this girl right here said to us at the start when she introduced herself, she's got a master's degree in something, I can't remember exactly what. She knows everything there is to know about Arctic birds. But she said, I found this job where your job is to go on holiday with people, and I think this is just wonderful. I'm going to keep doing this until I get sick of it, or I turn 60, whichever happens first. So, so that's the sort of attitude they have, and they're great people. Went back to Juneau, a couple of days in Juneau, and then we flew from Juneau to Anchorage for part 2 of this trip. I've often said to people that, I'm lucky enough to have flown around lots of the world. I've flown over the Andes and over the Rockies and throughout Europe and looked down on these sort of mountains, and I've always said that I came back to New Zealand, and you fly down into Queenstown on a gorgeous day. Flying into Queenstown beats them all hands down. It does not beat Alaska. Alaska just goes up another quantum level. It just goes on and on and on, and the mountains are so extraordinary and the glaciers are so huge that it's just, I just spent the whole time looking out the window going, wow, look at that. Anyway, so then we went to part 2 of this trip, which is another Chris McLennan trip, and this is what Chris calls the Alaska Bears trip, and basically it's all about photographing bears. We'll talk about it a little bit in a minute. Another Chris McLennan trip, really well guided, really well structured, really well taught, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. We went to Anchorage. The first part of the trip was in this place called Lake Clark National Park. That's that green space there. And we were on a little camp just along there, and it's called the Silver Salmon Creek Lodge. And this place, so basically when they made these things in National Park, anybody who had some land there was allowed to keep it. And it's unsellable, but it's part of the National Park, and it's sort of $1 each way type of thing. And the people that took over from from the lodge. It was set up as a kind of a fishing, semi-commercial fishing arrangement. They decided when they stayed there and looked into it, they might be able to do a few other things, and they were going to make it a fishing lodge, which it has become. But they also found that if they stopped shooting the bears and scaring them away, and they just allowed them to come and go, the bears didn't mind the people. And so they didn't become habituated, but they did their own thing and pretty much came to ignore them. They then started getting photographers in who loved this sort of situation, and that's what they've been doing for the last 10 years. It's a combination of fishing, like fly fishing type stuff, and photography trips. So that's what we did in Lake Clark. The other park is down here, there's the Katmai National Park, and that is another bears-orientated area that we did a short trip to at the end, and that's where Brooks Falls is, somewhere you might have heard about, but anyway, that's part B of the trip I'll talk about later. So the first one was in Lake Clark, Silver Salmon Lodge, and we flew from Anchorage up to there in another one of those Beaver aeroplanes, and here's us arriving in the lodge in the Beaver. You'll notice when you see the other picture of it, it doesn't have the big snout like the turbo one, but this is the lodge buildings over here, right tucked into the forest area, and there's a bunch of sort of meadow areas, and then there is the sand, and that's how you arrive. You land on the sand. There's no roads in there, so you can come by a boat or via aeroplane, and aeroplane's a much more civilised way to do it. And this is an immaculate old Beaver, and I ended up sitting on the flight deck with the guy there on the way there and had a great chat and really enjoyed it. Cool place. So we got off the aeroplane and we jumped onto these motorbikes with little trailers, and off we went. And we had been there less than 10 minutes. We went up and over the hill, and that's what we saw. Bear just wandering along. We'd spent the whole time in the, on the cruise, people going, "Did you see a bear?" And no, we didn't see a bear, or somebody sighted a bear as it disappeared into the bush, and that was the highlight. And the bear just wandered along the track towards us. But what's most extraordinary is there was a group of photographers who the bear just wandered past. So this is another group. It's a bit bigger than most of the groups. They were there for a day. So, but you can see the guide in the middle whose job is to make sure the bear doesn't, do anything radical. He doesn't have a gun, but he does have some bear spray. And the interesting thing is, and this became important later on, they tell us you have to stand together. And I must admit, if somebody told me before I'm going to go on a photography trip and I have to stand shoulder to shoulder with another 8 people and I'm not allowed to walk off in my own direction, I might have said, nah, not interested. But it's really cool, and there was things to be gained out of it. But literally, the bear just took absolutely no notice of the people, and he's, what do you reckon, 2, maybe 3 metres away as he wandered past. Okay, this is a video that should, here we go. Bears at the Silver Salmon Lodge. Is this sound? See if we can stop it. There's a couple of short videos. It's not the end of the world if it isn't, but... Okay, no sound. Imagine water flashing. I spent ages tightening up the sound in this video. So the idea is that the bears are on the beach digging for clams. That's what they do. I'll talk about that in a second. They just watch the bears. There's big claws, you can just flip the thing apart. Anyway, that's a kind of overview of... No, you can stop. There we go. Normally, at the time of the year we were there, the forest, the bears have they've woken up from their hibernation, but not by a long time, and they haven't really got a lot of condition on, and they spend most of their time in the meadow kind of area, eating grass, basically. They're omnivores, so they'll eat whatever, but they have to eat quite a lot of grass to get the nutrition out of them. But it was all a bit different this year because, so normally there would have been a dozen bears throughout the grassy areas, and they just stay there and they have no problem with people photographing them, or you choose the mother and the cubs and they basically just, and then they go down to the beach to get the clams when the tide is right. So they've got to get the tide right to get the clams. But this year they weren't in the meadow, and the reason they weren't in the meadow was because of this. The berries had started way earlier and the forest was just full of these berries. So blueberries on the left, you could just go and grab a handful of wild blueberries and they're just really, really nice. There's a slightly woodier taste than the commercial ones, but they're really, really tasty. The red currants on the right-hand side were a bit more tart, and the big raspberry-looking things are called salmon berries. They come in yellow as well, and they are probably the size of a boysenberry. They're really big, and the bushes are just full of them. And the bears spent most of their time during the day when the tide was wrong just eating berries. So it was a bit of a bugger. You didn't have as many bears around, but they were still there. And you could certainly tell when you got to the beach what the bears had been eating. And they were still there, but the protein levels in the clams were high enough that when it came to clamming time with the tides, they were pretty keen to get out and dig for the clams. And so this was one of the people that was in the group with us. This is what we were doing. We just collected in groups there, and we would try, the bears would move along the beach, and we were just trying to get in front of them and let them move towards us, and they just came on past as they walked to us. Sort of a metre Andrew away is pretty about the standard distance we would be looking to get to them from the start. So the next half a dozen pictures are just various pictures I took of bears. I'm not going to say much, there's just more bears on the beach. It's a bit boring, but the point being that here we were in a group of 6. We weren't allowed to go away from each other because we had to be this big visual mass that the bear would walk past and ignore. So you're trying to stand in the same place and get a different view or a different take. So a high, low, overexposed, underexposed, all that sort of stuff is what you do and those sort of things to create different pictures. So here's a collection of different pictures from the same thing. So this is the bear you've seen before. Oops, go back. That one. This is probably the most intense thing. What happened was another group came up close to us, but not particularly close. There was a gap, sort of me to Adrian away, and the bear is where he is now. And he saw the gap in the group, and he went for the gap. So he just get closer and closer and closer and closer, and walked between the two groups, like less than a metre away. And his feet are pretty big, particularly when you're looking at them from not very far away. So
And those claws.
they are huge, yep. And he looked directly at me as I'm holding the camera at him, and it was like, oh. Yeah. And sometimes there were no bears, but you could see where they were. So we kind of got down there, and footprints of bears were kind of cool. So that was pretty special, to be that close to wild animals doing their thing, and to feel reasonably confident that they weren't that interested in me. Was just fascinating. It's a similar sort of thing to what you can do in Africa, but we didn't have a vehicle to hide in, so we were just walking along the beach, hoping they didn't decide we might be tasty. There's other things you can do there. We also went for, there's a lake just on the inside, back in towards, we had a cruise around the lake, and I've got a whole bunch of ICM pictures that I took on the lake, which was fun. I had to do that. I couldn't not do ICM for a whole week. So, but we also went out on the boats. This is the other way you can get in and out to the place. They've got two of these boats. But we went across to this island in the foreground, which is called Duck Island, and you'll see some, these things, what are they called? Puffins. There's a puffin colony there. Before I want to talk about that, I'll talk about another thought I had when we were there. When we were looking around Europe, and you probably, I don't know who, those of you who walked around Europe and stuff, you start talking about the ABCs of the place, and another bloody castle or another bloody church. I thought it was the ABVs in Alaska, another bloody volcano. They're just everywhere. Extraordinary Mount Egmont looking place all over the place. But anyway, Duck Island at the bottom is where the puffin colony was, and we went on the shore there to we were right up close to them, trying to capture pictures of these puffins who either sit there waiting, doing nothing, or blast off at 1,000 miles an hour when they start flying. So trying to get pictures of them getting airborne like that was challenging, but really good fun. And off they go. This is the standard Pacific puffin, and this one here is the other one. They have two different types there. It's called a crested puffin. You'll notice the difference. It's black, and it's not a particularly good shot, this one, but it's one that fitted the view of I wanted. But he's got a yellow sort of crested thing on the top of his head, so the different variations of what they were. So we're taking photographs against the rocks. We also went back out on the boats and went round, and I really enjoyed photographing them against the water. This is my aerodynamics interest in seeing the shape of the bird's wing as it kind of flies along. When they take off, they're really quite funny. They do this walk on the water thing. I'm sure you've all seen birds that struggle to get airborne, but these things are absolutely hopeless. Their wings are not particularly long for the size of their big fat bellies, I'll put it that way, and they have to run quite a long way doing this walk on water thing until they eventually jump into the air and somehow manage to stay airborne. So it's kind of cool to watch these splashes as they walk along. And there's a crested one, and you can actually see the yellow little crested feathers on the back of his head, and the black body as he's doing his walk on water thing to try to get airborne. But the aim of the game when you're photographing these things is to try and get something that sort of incorporates a picture of the puffin and the rockery that they live in, and I'm quite happy with this one against just finding getting the bird in front of a blank space is the hard part. But the key in this whole thing is getting a picture of the puffin with fish in its mouth. So I was kind of stoked to get one of these sort of things. Interestingly, they go in standard kind of racetrack patterns. When they come back into land, if they can't land, they go around a standard circuit again. And where the guides pointed out to us, you can see one particular puffin and you watch him. I saw this guy with the fish in his, and we were all watching him, and he went across and down and out, and he's miles away in the distance, and I'm trying to keep a fix on him, and I think it's that one, and I pointed my camera at it, and sure enough it was. So this is when the wonders of the modern technology is really cool, and it locked on focus, and I'm stoked to get that picture. So that was the conclusion of the week with Chris at Silver Salmon Lake. We went back to Anchorage, and the next day we flew with Katmai Air up to Brooks Falls, there's another place called King Salmon, and that was, remember I show you on the original thing, was about twice the distance, so that's about a 50-minute flight on a same sort of aeroplane that Sounds here have got, so one of those 12-seaters, and you go into this King Salmon's airport in the middle of nowhere, and that they also have float planes there that then take you out to the place you're going. So you've probably seen, or you'll, next time you see them, you'll recognise them, pictures of bears in sort of advertising things, standing in this little waterfall, catching fish as they jump up onto it. This is the famous Brooks Falls. It's kind of one of a kind place, and there are thousands of people there every day to look at it. So it's a completely different experience, but also a cool one. So this is an overview of where we came. So this is the stream here, and that bit there is Brooks Falls, where all the jumping happens. Silver Salmon Airport's kind of over there somewhere, and you flew in with the float plane. This is us on the way out. I got a decent view of where we're going. You came in and you landed into here this way, and you come right up onto the beach, and you can see the track that goes there over the bridge, and then there's another track that comes around and goes up towards the falls. When you get off there, you have to go and do bear school before you're allowed out of the thing. This is a really well-controlled national park, regimented thing, but designed to get thousands of people through and extract a fairly large amount of money from each of them as they do this, but it's kind of worth it. It takes about 40 minutes to walk from there across the thing up to Brooks Falls, and from the bridge there's all sorts of, you can view all the way up here, and there were lots of fish and lots of bears and stuff, and there was a brand new looking carbon monopod with, it looked like a Canon camera in the water as we walked across the bridge, which was kind of fun to watch. But anyway, you walk up there, and basically then you get to Brooks Falls, and I've got another video of Brooks Falls, so let's get this to play. Heaps of fish, as you can see. So, no, don't do that. There we go. So, the difference is because, like I said before, lots of berries this time, also lots and lots of salmon. The red salmon, which was those were, for some reason this year's numbers were just off scale high, really 3, 4, 5 times as many as they usually have, and they're doing really well in the fisheries and all this sort of stuff. And there were just so many in the in the river that the bears pretty much didn't have to go and stand on the falls and catch them. They just stood in the river and grabbed them, like you saw there. So they were just sitting in the pool watching the fish go behind them and blasting up and down. When you get there, there are 2 viewing stands, and there was the major viewing stand, which is the view that goes right along the falls. You've got a time limit on that. You've got to put your name in there, Smith group of 3 sort of thing, and you can go and stand at the other one. You can do as much as you like, and then they call you, and you're now allowed 30 minutes or 25, can't remember, but something like that, on the main thing, and there's still full of people there, so you've got to push your way to the front and wait your turn and all that sort of stuff. But if you're lucky, there'll be bears on the top catching fish, but there weren't any when we spent our 20 minutes there because they spend the whole time in the water because there were so many fish. But anyway, this was taken from the bottom. This was shooting up towards the falls from the free-for-all stand area, not the premium area. But as I said the other day, I kind of made this, which I sort of like, of the fish jumping around. But the bears just kind of sit in the river and they were just ducking under, grabbing fish. It was just amazing. You can see how they just put on so much weight while these things are going ballistic. And as you can see, this was typical area. I don't know how many fish are there, but and you fill the whole river up like that. Their spawning ground for the salmon, where they actually spawn, are just above the falls. So they just jump. If the ones who get above the falls, and I reckon of the ones we saw, there's probably 1 in 50 are managing to get up the falls. So not many. And if they don't get up the falls and the bears don't eat them, they just die. So yeah, it's a pretty ruthless, cutthroat kind of place. And yeah, as I said, I just enjoyed just sitting. The bears are just sitting there chomping away on fish, having a great time. They also have a few arguments, and there's these two big bears over the back. They're quite some distance away, but they were going at it for 10 minutes or so, arguing over I don't know what. But there was so many fish that they could both just, if they'd used their energy on catching fish, they would have won out of it. But they were just showing off and having a fight, I think. Right up underneath the falls with the bears, with the fish. We did see one who has obviously been there so many times that he enjoys it, went on the top of the falls and caught some fish, and I got a shot of him just having just caught it, but it's not the primo shot from the angle where you can just see him catching it, but I saw a bear catch a fish, and so I'm happy with that. So that's what I saw. But what I found was the difference that we saw there was the number of fish. So this kind of picture here showing of the bear and the multiplicity of the fish was the most thing. And I kind of thought, I'd been there halfway through it, and I went, oh, I bet if I put a polarizer on, that would make a huge difference to the glare on the water. And it made an unbelievable difference, and I wish I'd thought of it when we first got there. So lesson learned, just be a bit more open to it. And my favourite shot from Brooks Falls is kind of this guy sitting on the rock, chomping on his fish, and the fish that are, you can clearly see that they're smart enough to know, let's not go right up by where that bear is. So that was the conclusion of the bears trip, which was something pretty special. But I've got a few points to finish this presentation off with. I'm kind of calling it points to remember. This was a ski trip, so a Spend the Kids Inheritance trip. And what I'm going to encourage everybody to do is to do a ski trip. And you don't have to have kids who you're taking the inheritance off, but what I'm getting at with this is to make it a selfish trip. When you come to your photographs, do something that is kind of selfish, because it's just really cool and really worth doing. You don't have to do everything in a selfish way, but you do have to do some trips for yourself. And I get that I'm really lucky enough to be able to go to these sort of places, and not everybody is able to be, but everybody has their own level of ski trip. Identify what it is and make the effort to do a selfish photographic orientated trip. It's worth it. It's worth comparing an expedition versus a photography trip. The expedition we went on the first time is pretty much the same as when you go with non-photographers on somewhere who kind of take 2 looks at it and walk away, and you want to take 10 and get out all your gear and all that sort of stuff. If you go on a photographer's expedition about photography, it's about photography, and that's a step up worth doing. The value of good guides can't be overstated. The first trip, the winter trip I went on, there was a guy who was on that trip who he and his wife had come back the second time. He is a well kind of known business. He's an Australian guy. He runs in one of the Northern Territory airlines. So an interesting guy, and I talked to him, and he said that they went on the first trip and they wanted to come back to Alaska. They spent some time trying to explore other options, and in the end they concluded that Chris and the guides that he had were worth the money, and he couldn't do it any cheaper himself, and he was likely to do it less well. So he came back and did Chris's trip again. So what I got out of that conversation was find the right guide, find somebody that works for you, and go back and do it again with the same people. Keep the gear simple. A couple of the people on the Bears photography thing, we went out on the first day, and one lady had 2 cameras and another bag with 3 lenses in it. So she had her 800mm Nikon lens on one side and her 70-200 on the other side, and she had a 24-70 in the bum bag. And I don't think she kind of knew where to start or what to do. I had a 28-400, which is a really fantastic lens, but it's one lens. I didn't take it off. It was there the whole time. And I did take it off at one point. I lent it to her to have a play with because she was interested in it. I used my another lens I had for this particular shoot. She came back and she got on the phone and ordered one to be picked up when she got back to Anchorage. So keep it simple, and it doesn't, well, you probably, if you're going to go and shoot puffins, you want a long lens, or you want something vaguely suitable, but don't take 4 things, because I think you can get swamped with the whole possibility of that. So I'm going to bear that in mind from now on and simplify my kit when I go away in particular. But the main thing is have fun. It was just an amazing trip. I really enjoyed both of those, and I'm just going to keep going, keep spending Kendra's inheritance. This is the plan. That's it. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has them, or time to go. Yeah. Thanks. No trouble.
Well, thank you again, Ian. That's really excellent. I completely endorse the idea of getting guides. I had one in Venice, and it was a most memorable part of a trip away. It really was. And is it true that the next Laurie Thomas, they haven't decided on a venue? No, thank you very much, Ian. That's wonderful. Next meeting, closing dates, 21st of September, Natural History Print 3. This month's MDC is oil. Any other details are on Diana's email. Okay. Next meeting, 7 p.m, C-grade question and answer, and a reminder to send your questions in, any questions about anything relating to photography or the club, to Ian. And following that, there'll be the results of the C-grade, PI and print competition. Anything else I've missed? In which case, it's thanks very much to John Suckling for this 7 o'clock session, to Ian, of course, for Alaska, for all of you for coming out tonight, and to opening and closing, I'm not sure who that was. Sound, is that Andrew and Alan? Thank you very much. I think that's about it. Supper as well. Cheers back, good night, and safe driving home.